I had this all open and set up, then Teams decided to suddenly start going slow, so I just closed everything down, including this, and started it again. But shouldn't take too long to get back up.
Teams is easily the worst program that nobody can use, and everybody has to right now.
It's just, and I keep saying this, but like it should be so good. Like if it just wasn't so like slow and laggy and weird in certain things, what it does is good.
They've just picked some very interesting design features, haven't they? That's what it is.
Yeah. I think that's part of it, isn't it? Hopefully they'll refine this and get better. But then, if you look at how long it's taken, to get to where we are now with things like Word and Outlook and stuff like that, they're still pretty ugly, really, the way that they think about things.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just me. Right. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at this time a Privesc. So we're going to build a privilege escalation, and to do that, we're going to have to give it something to use, right? So hopefully this system doesn't have any major problems. So we're going to have to introduce one. All right. Now this is something that you're going to have to do. I did think about giving people a special target to go on, and the more I thought about it, I couldn't work out a way to have a target machine that had enough variety of potential exploits and in things like that wouldn't just sort of make it so that everyone ended up with the same code. And I really wanted people to explore and have reason to find other things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the process of thinking about how what you might want to do, and then an example of how we would introduce that vulnerability so that we can test our exploit. Okay, so it's not very often you get that as a job, is actually making vulnerabilities. So enjoy it while we've got it. Okay, I'm going to jump into the code that we had previously, which I think was there it was. So I made a host info thing here, and we looked at ways that we would run things, and we expanded on it. I haven't yet managed to edit this video, but I will edit the video where we went through this one and upload it very soon. So expect that to go with this video. But for now, we're going to look at making a Privesc. So let's look at files that we've got, and we have the rough plugin outline. And as we discussed before, we do have this Privesc and enumeration thing. And you can see here's an example of how I've adjusted them. I mean, I could have done this without using the separate classes again, because we could have had like a tag field or whatever. There are ways to go around it, but yeah, just as a demo. Anyway, what are we going to do? Let's go down, right down to the bottom. So we've got something fresh to start with again. And I'm going to say, right, class some Privesc, and it's going to extend the Privesc class. There we go. And it's going to do whatever it needs to do. Now, we always were going to want to have the initialization and to overload the execute. So we'll put those things in now, even though we don't know where we're going yet, and we'll rename the whole class in a minute when it makes sense. But let's just start with boilerplate. The reason I would say in your case as a student to do this is because if you start doing these things, you're already starting to gain a few marks, even if you're not finished, towards that end point. So if you get stuck somewhere along the way and you've got a half-finished thing, that's better than having nothing because you weren't sure how to get to the end point. If you can get to the halfway point, that's better than nothing at all. Here we'd put things like self.name, just like before, so we'll leave that empty for now. Self.author. Self.description. Actually don't know yet. which I'll just put pass in. So this is the rough outline of what we're going to do. We'll put in a proper name, we'll put in a proper description when we know what it does, we'll give it a proper actual class name when we know what it does, and we'll work out how to execute when we know what it does. Right, so what are we going to do? How are we going to build something? Well, there are actually a bunch of ways to do Privesc. There are, in fact, hundreds and hundreds of them, because it all depends on the system that you're on. You can't be guaranteed of finding it. One of the things I would recommend is perhaps that you think about pairing up these two parts, right? So what you could do is you could say, I'm going to do one enumeration, which is going to look for certain things, and that enumeration will perhaps lead to potentially being able to execute a Privesc. Okay, so you can build that. I don't want to give you too many sort of pointers, but one of the things I would consider, and I'm not going to show you how, but you can have a think about this as a good thing to do, is I would personally add to Privesc a thing that tests to see whether it's possible. Okay, so each privilege escalation is going to have something that it requires. Okay, so maybe a certain file with an SUID bit, maybe a certain entry in the sudoers file, maybe a certain version of a particular binary, etc., etc. What you could do is you could have another function that all of these are expected to have, which returns true or false, depending on whether it's applicable to this system, as in, can this run on this particular system? Even if it's the right OS, does it have the right conditions? You could put in here that it will always return true in the basic Privesc thing. So, if you don't overload it, if it's always going to be used, then, sorry, if you don't override it, if it's always going to be, okay to use, then you just wouldn't bother in your specialization over here. If you had a certain situation where you actually, do you know what, I do need to know whether this is going to work or not before I run it, because I don't want to alert people, I don't want to potentially do something that's might damage the system and not actually get me a result, then your menu system could actually have a little flag that says these are the ones that potentially could run on this system, for example. So different ways you can approach similar problems. Anyway, I wasn't really going to go into that, but Matty's question just made me realise that would be one of the things that I would put in. Okay, so there are lots of things you can do. I mentioned that you can go to things like well, it's not lol bins. Lol bins is Windows GTFO bins. Okay, this is one of my sort of personal interests. Is things like this, because so GTFO bins are things to get you out of a restricted shell, right? So you can work out for yourself why it's called GTFO bins, but you get the flip out of them, right? So each of these possibilities is really a binary or something that's on the system that you could use depending on how it's installed and how it's configured to get out. Okay, so commonly they're things that allow you to get out if you happen to have privileges to run it with higher privileges, right? So that doesn't sound good. If you have the if it's set up to allow you to run it at higher privileges, usually it's not meant to give you a shell or some other way to access things you're not supposed to, but this is a list of things that, should that happen, you can abuse them to get there. Now, some of them are fairly obvious, right? So if you've got things like CP, which is the copy command, if this has, for example, SUID bit set, as in, it allows you to actually have it run as root, so you run it and you automatically run as root, or sudo, you're allowed to run sudo and CP without a password, then it's really, really easy to use these things to get access to things that are outside of your usual user area. Okay, so what have we got with this one? So just CP. So obviously CP allows you to copy and paste things. If the binary has the SUID bit set, it does not drop the elevated privileges that may be exploited to access this file system. So what are they doing here? So they echo data, and then they copy that into a file. So they essentially allow you to write into a file, and so you can essentially do what you like with that. These lines here are just setting it up to demonstrate. So this is actually, in our case, how we would set these things up to allow us to do it. Now, CP is a fairly obvious one. If you can use CP, You can copy data out of files. You can do all sorts of things. And if you were going to do something with real privilege escalation, what you would do is you would use that to overwrite other files. Like, you could do things like overwrite the CW2 file to give you privileges and things like this. I would recommend not doing anything quite so destructive. I would do things like, show how you can access the shadow file, right? That would be, for me, that's a perfectly acceptable privilege escalation demonstration. If you can read the contents of that using this tool, then that's fine, okay? You don't have to, unless you want to, try going down the route of thinking, well, how can I actually turn this into dropping a shell that's got root access? If you want to, absolutely fine, but just be aware that if you start doing things like overwriting your SW2 file or the password file and things like that, it is very easy to break the system that you're on. Now, as long as you've checked your stuff into GitHub and you're using the VM that I provided, all you need to do to reset stuff is download the VM again and start again. If you want to, you can even tag the VM, the current state of the VM as a particular release. We get the wording right for this particular thing. So we're in VirtualBox, aren't we?
That's the snapshot.
Snapshots. Thank you. So tagging is a GitHub thing. Snapshots. That's the one I was after. So you could store it beforehand, try it out to make sure it works, and if it breaks, you just go back to the snapshot. It's all in the menus in VirtualBox. Is actually fairly self-explanatory, but you don't need to. Right.
So is a snapshot basically a save of what's the state of the VM currently?
Exactly.
Then?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's really useful. So
it's like a backup then of what you've currently got.
And you can have multiple of them. You can save them along various points, and you don't have to sort of stop at a certain point and sorry.
Whatever you do, don't use them as backups. They're not proper backups. If you do that in a production environment, you will lose a lot of information.
Yeah,
it's not a backup.
No, I get
in that sense.
Okay.
But it's good as a backup for trying something and going back to it, kind of thing, right? So, but not for long-term backups or incremental backups and things like that.
James, what about testing it on your own FTP? Is that something that we can consider?
On your own FTP, as in an FTP service?
Yeah, just to create a quick one, download.
You could do
on the Kali Linux.
I would suggest that actually, if you're doing that, it's not really a local Privesc thing, so that's a remote attack.
Right. Okay.
If it's running on the system and it's running with the right privileges and you can use it, then by all means, make use of that. So you can set the situation up. If you wanted to do it, all I say is install it inside the VM so that you're not accidentally trashing an outside thing. But
just set it up, from is it the VFTPD, whatever it is, and just set up a few usernames on there.
Yeah, you could absolutely do that. I mean, if you want to go down that route, you could look at CVEs and go. But generally, the things that you'll find in GTFO bins are much easier to exploit. Like, these are sort of the things, if someone accidentally gives any of these SU-do or SUID bit sets, then you're kind of done. I mean, many of them, like CP, it's fairly obvious, but you look at things like, if you've seen Cowsay, Cowsay is a thing that I don't know if it's installed on here, but we can install it really quickly. Where is it installed? Yeah. Okay, so I know it's in the path, but it's in user games Cowsay. I wouldn't really call it a game, but anyway. So Cowsay will say whatever you put in. So you can put it on the command line. Now, you might think this is the most ridiculous piece of software, but it's surprising how prevalent it is. It's out there because people like to use it for messages of the day stuff, silly things. If you've got multiple users, you can send messages to them. So if we've got Alice, probably hold on. Very often message talk. Right. There she is. Yeah. Maybe she's actually going to login prompt. Oh, do you know what? This isn't important. Right. I'm getting way off topic. You can send stuff to logged in users on the same system, using these things, and people like to mess about. Okay. So how can we use this to do things? Well, if you look, Cowsay can get things from a file. So if we have Cowsay and it's got the set UID bit set, SUID bit set, then so let's go and find it first. Well, let's go to the right place. So I'm going to try and abuse Cowsay just because I thought it was the funniest one that was there. So I'm going to go and I'm going to make sure that this is misconfigured. All right, so we've got Cowsay and we have Cowthink, and they're actually linked to each other. We have Cowsay, yeah, there it is. So sudo u plus a plus s Cowsay. We'll do it. Sorry, what if you would include chmod? Okay. Now, if we have a look here, we should see that we have an S in here for being allowed to execute these. So instead of the X, we have an S. Okay, so instead of execute, we have this S, right? So do we need to do it for O as well? Let's see what. Let's just try it. So we can do Cowsay minus F to give it a file name. Not going to overwrite the shadow password file because that would be annoying. And make sure I haven't overwritten the shadow password file. Not yet. This is why it's good to have those backup snapshots to go back to if you're trying stuff out. Right, man, Cowsay. Let's have a look. Minus F cow file. What's cow file? Okay, if I have a simple block of Perl. Okay, Perl code. I don't really want to do that. Right, let's have a look in here. Here we go. Right, so it's not as simple as just doing it through there. So if we look here, we've got this, and we're going to put that into a file. Okay, so that's even worse. I thought it was just going to be allowed to execute, but he's quite literally going to give us a lot more than that. So what do we do? Well, first of all, we put this command into a file. So they're using make temp. So let's just take that bit first. So make temp will give you a temporary file. So the .tf gives us this. Should echo it rather than do that. So you can see there it is. So we've got a random a file somewhere. You could have just named it something if you wanted to. And then what we're going to do is we're going to echo this into that file. So now, if I do cat and that, all we've done is we've put exec bin sh into that file. And now, according to this, I can use this to get it to execute it. So let's try that. Did I get a shell first? I don't think I did get a shell, but I don't think I got it as root. So I think I've just cocked up my set UID. So maybe you get the good example over here. Today I just did it with a plus X, but I thought chmod plus X. Say. I don't actually know whether it's running Perl. To explore the distance. Yeah. Let me have a look. Maybe I should have picked something more obvious. I think it should work. Why not? Let's try again. Let's just try it outside of Z shell in case it's being weird for us, which can happen. KFC F. We don't know what the temp file was because it's not going to be setting this. Oh, actually, it might be. That's all. No, just go and find it from up here. Sorry, you're just watching me mumble about what's going on, but essentially what I'm doing is just doing the same thing in here, but without the environment variable. So KFC minus F that and X. Definitely not giving us that. Okay, do you know what? I'm not even going to stay here and keep debugging and taking very much time. We'll try something different because I'll maybe come back to this. Sure, let's try it with SUDO first because I already have SUDO. So it works with SUDO but not with SetUID. I am sorry, clearly not with it. One more time. No, right. Let's skip that one. I think we should be able to get stuff from a file with this anyway. Paranoid? No, we don't want that. Don't bulk mode. Right, let's go with something a bit more obvious. Okay, so let's say we go with curl. Okay, so with curl, if curl has been set to use the SetUID bit, then this the SUID bit, then we can use it to get local files. Okay, so for example, if I say curl and then instead of doing HTTP, so this is the thing we use to get stuff from the web, as you've seen before, we can actually use file and then get local things. So if I said curl x password, which I should be able to read, then it outputs this to the screen. Okay, so this is good. If I wanted to do this with shadow, then it won't let me open it. If I had sudo permissions, then it will let me do it. So either if this is set in the sudoers file, which is one way that this can happen, or as I'm going to try and do here is I'm going to try and make it so that curl runs with escalated privileges, then we should be able to do it. So I'm guessing that it's going to be exactly the same kind of thing that they're doing in here. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so they're downloading it from one place and then writing it somewhere else. So you could easily use this. You could use curl in this way to overwrite files like the shadow file, or to overwrite the sudoers file to give you sudo access. So you could use it to actually gain shells and more permanent privileges, but we're not. We're going to do the least potentially damaging thing and just show that we can get the shadow password file. Okay, so that will be enough of a demo for us. So let's find out where curl is. User bin curl, so cd user bin curl, cd user bin, sudo chmod plus s curl. Okay, hopefully now I can run curl without sudo and I get this. Okay, So how would I turn this into an actual exploit? Right. So I'm going to do this in here. I'm going to call it Perl escalator. Configured. Okay, that's what's going to do. That's its description, and I'm really just going to follow the same kind of pattern as we used before. I'm not going to do anything fancy. So I'm going to just go back over to my previous one, and I'm going to use this same sub-process thing to grab it. Okay, so if you remember, we already have this function written, and it made it very simple for us to do the things that we needed to do. Okay, so let's have a look and do that. So when I execute, I'm going to do grab output, and what I want to run is simply curl shadow, and then out. Okay. Install this as one of the menu options, and we can test it. Yeah. So, one moment. Sorry, just didn't let my kids in. Go back from school. So, privilege escalations dot append, and then we called it curl escalator. Doesn't need anything passed into it. Make sure I import it. So. There we go. Hold on. Sorry, heard strange noises. Okay, so we've included curl escalator. We've got over here, we have a class, so we make sure that this is going to match the same name. So curl escalator here, curl escalator imported there, and then curl escalator is included in the list of escalations. Further, here we go. So hopefully, when we run our code, and I'll just activate the environment. Okay. Plus. So we can see there P1 gives us information and say yes to execute. Okay, what do we get? No such file directory. Okay, so I think we need to give it the path. So let's try that. Which curl? User bin curl. Go. P1. Yes. Oh, come on. Why not? Let's see. Curl. Having a good day for demo's not working today. What I did on here. Command. Right, I think I also should split this into two parts because when popen, it's the same as with some of the other things that execute like spawn. He expects a sort of a list of things that get passed out, and each one should be, so this is going to be the path, and then this is the thing that gets passed to it. So I think when it's saying it can't find, if you look, it says in no such file or directory, user bin curl this, it's looking for that as a whole thing. So there we go, we'll just fix that one. P1, yes, and there we get the output. Okay, so not particularly difficult thing to do. What I would like to do now, if it was, this is my submission, is I would go through this and I would use this to find, I would split it based on these colons, and I would show all the hashes, actually show some information separately. Like what have I found from this? I found that I've got 2 people with actual valid hashes, and these are the hashes that they've got, and then you can use those, to maybe try and crack the passwords and so on. But what happens if the SUID bit is not set? I just cannot say SUID today for some reason. So let's go and have a look. User bin, user bin, chmod -s. Okay. That's where we were. So we go back to check out sleep. Okay, so we'll try and run it, and what we get is couldn't open file. Okay, so it clearly has some requirements. So one of the things that we need to do to make sure that this works, we need to test that it works first. Okay, we need to try this thing out. Unlike privilege escalation, where some basics are always going to be there, unlike enumeration, where some of those basic commands will always be there, or at least almost certainly going to be there, like host name and things. We're not guaranteed that with this, so we should check before we go any further. So how do we tell what's there? Well, remember in Python we've got a lot of things that deal with files. One of them is pathlib, and I'm pretty sure that pathlib will help us to get that information. So let's just try that out first. Import pathlib, p equals pathlib.path user bin curl. There we go, and we can look at the things that it does. So remember we did this a while ago, and you've got things like chmod, which you can do. You can check whether it exists, so that would be a good thing to do. So you can do p.exists true. Well, that's going to be very useful because that will tell us whether the thing's actually there. So we should do that one first. Let's see what else we've got. We've got is file. Maybe we should check whether it's an actual file, not something else. So we've got stats. We can look at it in a minute. We've got owner.
Did that have chmod on there?
It does, but obviously if you don't have permissions, it won't let you do it.
Oh.
But yeah, it can do it. I mean, it's it's really pathlib is awesome.
It's pretty cool.
P.stat. Sorry.
We've only really got 3 minutes left. Have you got something to do after this, James?
No, I can stay for a bit longer. Right. Okay. inode device. UID, GID. Come on, there must be a way to do this. Yeah, change permissions. Go away. Okay, right to Google.
As Dan is so often fond of saying, the NSA level hacking tool known as Google.
It is the most useful thing that's ever been invented for pen testers and black hat hackers at the same time. Let's see, Stack Overflow, which okay, we haven't really explicitly talked about Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is awesome, and everyone knows this, but just be aware that it's not always correct, right? So people can give you bad advice. So test stuff out. Right, so apparently it is in stat. And
I often find it also has old advice quite a lot.
That is
true.
Yeah.
There was a certain a certain library that I was attempting to use for the current project, but on my version of Python that's been eliminated now. So I've kind of had to try and find something else completely different.
Yeah, you're right. The advice can be off. For this, right? So just sticking to this problem for now, though. ST mode apparently is the thing that's in there, but it's a bit mask. There's have the constants. So what we need to do is work out a way to tell whether we've got that from there. I would have thought there's a nicer way to do this. There probably is, and I'll work it out at some point and tell everyone. But there's going to be a particular bit that's set. So like if we do p.stat there, and actually let's get up another terminal. So -l user bin. There we don't have it set, and then if we do this, possibly see if there's a difference. ST.cr, I don't think it's changed at all, so I'm not sure the set UID bit's going to be in that one. Okay, it's not going to be in that one. So we'll try the os.stat. os.stat. Yeah. No, it's got the same number. Okay, so maybe the set UID bit just isn't in there. Okay, right. Before I start writing my own, this is always the thing to do: is check to see if there's a Python way to do it. If not, we can actually resolve this in a different way. But let's just try this first. Python check UID bit. Stack Overflow from 10 years ago. Oh, here we go. That doesn't. No, S. Maybe we only get them from os.stat. Or this is no longer correct. Save that for later. Duplicate tab. Error messages is always interesting. Oh, come on. interesting to look at as well. Python 3. Yes. Right. Apparently it is. Hold on. Ah, right, not the stat object. What am I doing? Right. Okay. Okay. There we go. Right. So apparently that's the number that needs to be in there if it's correct. Just try it with the p stat. So s dot st mode. Okay, so that says that it's not set. And now, oh my goodness, I can't believe I just realised why it didn't seem to be working before. I never actually stopped to type in the password to set it. I am a complete idiot. And now it comes out as non-zero. Ah, that's so annoying. Right, so at least we know we can do this. So how do we build that testing, right? So before we run this, let's make sure that we can run this. So do I have pathlib in already? No. Import pathlib and stat. These are two things I'm going to need for this. We've worked out how. So I want to check these things. I'm going to actually make a function because I think it's going to be really useful. And in fact, this would be the kind of thing that would be really useful for testing multiple binaries if you wanted to go through and do it later. I'm going to do something that says check. I'll call it check binary. Okay. Check binary. It's path. We'd obviously write some documentation, but I'm trying to do this concisely, and we'll come back to that later and do it obviously, just not on video. So what we're going to do is I'm going to return two things: true if it exists as the first thing, or false if it doesn't, and then as the second thing, it's going to be true if it's set UID and false otherwise. Okay, and I can add more details to this if I really wanted to later on. So this could become quite a general purpose little tool. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to expect just a general path here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a path out of it. So shouting. Okay, so we check, we make one of these. Now, obviously, if this is a valid file or not, it still can create a path. You know, it doesn't really matter whether it exists. So we would say, you know, exists equals pl.exists. That's the first thing. And set UID is equal to pl.stat and stat.s ISU ID. And we check to see that that's not equal to 0. Okay, so we can just say that is not equal to 0. Okay, so then we can return exists and set UID. We can test these things out really easily. So in the right place. In here, what we can do is we can import JS plugins. So just as our little sanity check, not as an actual test. So it'd be very easy to write proper tests for this. Let's get the source, sorry. Check binary. So check binary, and I'm going to check user bin and stat result. Oh, yeah, because it's not stat result, it's that and st_mode. So that's our first little bit of. Okay, so that says it exists and it's got the SUID bit set. Let's go into the other terminal and take that SUID bit away. Now it says it does exist, but it's not there. And right, so no such file directory curly. Right, why was that? Well, because we tried to stat it even when it didn't exist. Right, so if it exists, then we do this. Okay, so SUID is equal to false to start with, because if it doesn't exist, it's safe to say that there's no SUID bit set. So now let's try that again. Import plugins, false, false, true, false, and true, true. There we go. That's not a bad little function to use for other things. So now what we can do is we can check this first. So we can say some result is equal to check binary. In fact, I'm also going to put curl path in here because there's always a chance it'll be somewhere else. One of the things you might do to extend this is start checking things like which curl to find out if it's on there, or even looking for it, actually going through and trying to find something. You can also check whether it's executable. There's all kinds of things you can do to really extend this into something even better, but for now we're going to go with user bin curl, and it also means then we can take that bit out and just replace that with curl path. Here is curl path as well. So you can see we've got this curl path. We're going to check it, so we'll have this result, and then we can say if res 0, so the first item, is equal to this. Well, actually, John, here's a little trick. We could do this as res 0 and res 1, because this is going to return two things. Yeah, so that'll be 0, that'll be the 1. You can also do stuff like this. We could say exists SUID equals this, and it will unpack that tuple into these two things. So exists will be the first thing that comes out, and SUID will be the second. Which is going to make this nice and easy now. So we can say if exists, do this, or we can say if not exists, print path exist. So we basically give up, and then we don't really need an else because we've got a return in there. So if it doesn't happen until I've been programming in JavaScript a bit, if not SUID, then we can say print curl not and return. And then if this and this didn't happen, then we didn't return to any of these points, which means we should be able to use this bit here. So let's go back to our software and say, right, P1 curl escalator, yes, we want to execute it, and it worked. Now let's try what happens if we don't have that set. So let's actually we didn't need to quit, but let's do it anyway. P1 yes, and what we get is curl does not have the SUID bit set. Not really nice output at the moment to do with proper spacing and things, but as you can see, we now have a check to make sure that it's valid. And like I said before, you could include in this check could be something separate. So you could actually have a test that the menu system does and always says, this system does not have the requirements to do this, or even limit what things it shows if it can't execute them all. So okay, so there we go. Now that was a sort of slightly long and slightly rambly because I didn't want to do anything pre-prepared. I wanted to actually say, right, let's see what the process of making something up would be. Right? Let's just imagine what it would be. Now you also, before we stop on this, I said that I want to show the set UID for the log bins. It's on the screen. GTFO bins. To make sure this stuff works. If you're running in Windows, so remember there's a requirement to do one in Windows if you can. lolbins, sorry, lolbas. This is the new version of this, living off the land. So different naming, but it's basically the Windows equivalent. Okay, so if these things allow you to escalate privileges, then you can go with those. You can have a play with those if you want to. There are plenty of other things. Also, you can just do Privesc Linux, right? Now look at that, basic Linux privilege escalation. Go and have a read through. What can we do? You know, what version of things, what applications are running. Oh, look at that, they're doing the enumeration part. Lots of ideas for that there. Is port forwarding possible? Confidential information. There you go. What things can we run? Various exploits. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to write it all from scratch. If you've got, like, you know, binary exploits and things, you can include those with it and execute them, right? So you can work that way. And there's plenty of other things. So have a look. Yeah, there's plenty of stuff out there. I would also look for cheat sheets for this stuff, because you know you're not trying to invent new Privesks. That's definitely outside the scope of this module. You're looking for, you know, just how people do this on the command line, then trying to automate that process. So, you know, here's a cheat sheet, you know, things that you can do. Have a look through, you know, have a look at the things, try them out.
Link that, please?
Which one?
The cheat sheet that you were just on, if that's okay.
I can do, hold on. There we go. Okay.
Thanks.
I'm going to stop recording and stop sharing, and then answer any questions that